here to make you look pretty.
Make me look pretty?
Yeah, you know, you talk and I just...
I do a good job making myself look pretty, no?
I don't know.
Not as good as when you're here? You think she thinks she's adding to it? Ness?
Yeah, see?
Right.
See?
All right. This is Byron Lazine and Nicole White, and you are tuned in to episode 53 of The Real Word.
We don't have that written down anywhere. That was good of you.
Yep. Well, I have it on the computer.
You're better than me.
Word is up. 53. Big news out of Zillow. We've been tracking Zillow relentlessly since the show started. They dropped a bomb last week, and they are now giving unvetted Zillow leads over to Premier agents. Obviously, with PA4 about 6 or 7 months ago, they stopped doing that. They were vetting out leads, but now via email, so email leads, they are handing back over to the Premier agent. What's your thoughts on that change of course from Zillow?
Well, we sort of been, you and I sort of were, I feel like we've talked about this before.
Lot.
Yeah. I think it's fabulous.
That they're giving the leads over?
Well, I mean, for us, for my personal, I like just having people's emails.
For your dopamine hit?
You know?
What was that line?
Oh, it was a good one.
We'll link it. We have there's two Inman articles that are pretty good. We're going to link them both up. If you're watching in a YouTube world, that's where the articles are linked. I don't think they're linked anywhere else, technically, right? Do we link them on Facebook? Oh, they're linked on Facebook, but definitely on a YouTube world. So, little quick call to action, guys. If you're listening, watching on Facebook, wherever you are, go subscribe onto YouTube. If you've just been watching on YouTube all along, not hitting subscribe, do that now. Just do it now.
Push there. But it's saying for agents and teams with great follow-up, it will be valuable, he said. For those that aren't great at follow-up, it may satisfy their dopamine-starved minds in getting more leads, but nothing else.
What they're saying is having these extra leads, if you're not following up on them, if you're following into the trap of National Association of Realtors reporting that 55% of agents don't follow up with a lead even once, let Zillow follow up on them. Originally, and I don't know, it doesn't reference it in these articles. Originally, Greg Schwartz that day in Boston said that if they make that switch, which now they have, you would have the option. Zillow, you can vet, or I'll take the unvetted. Yeah. And you could do it either way. I don't know if that's the case.
Well, and we were sort of talking about on that very first time that we started talking about Zillow and their new platform that, you know, like we would sort of miss having just any sort of, I mean.
Well, if you're good at follow-up, if you're good at drips, then you have the opportunity for them to circle back to you. If they're in the Zillow world and you stop becoming a Premier agent and say they're 24 months out and in 12 months you stop, you're going to lose them because Zillow's the one following up. They're going to realize you're gone, and they're going to send that out to some other Premier agent.
Yeah, I like having emails. I mean, it's sort of like doing an open house, right? I mean, not everybody's necessarily buying at that open house. The amount of people that I've met at open houses and then bought like years later.
Or sold, or we're just thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, or like they bought a house and now they're like, oh, I remember meeting you at an open house a few years ago when I bought my house. But like they're not using that same agent, but like I'm just like a reoccurring
and there's mixed results here. Melanie Cooker, the co-founder, chief executive, and managing broker of Property Sprocket.
Blows my mind.
Yeah, she said, this blows my mind. So she's saying she's had more success with PA4 than we ever have with any Zillow program. The conversation rate for us is running about 30% now versus 2% before, with a fraction of the wasted time and aggravation. I'll take quality over quantity any day. She was really liking PA4, how it was working for her, that she was being connected with vetted leads.
I guess for her personal self it was probably good, but like if you have a team and you have some agents that are just like, give them those like have them work on something, have them learn follow-up, have them like put something in effect.
What I've noticed, like agents like Melanie, who's, you know, sounds like she's a really good agent, I don't know anything about her.
Well, Inman's quoting her.
And so if you're a really strong agent, what the nice thing about what PA4, when they were vetting leads and then only giving them to the agents with a high customer satisfaction score, the nice thing if you're a top 5% follow-up agent, like if you're following up better than anybody else, is you're going to get more leads than anybody else. If you're not missing calls, you are going to get them all. So, maybe Melanie has a system in her back office where they're not missing shit. And so she's like, I don't want this to go away, because now the loser agents out there, the agents on the bottom half, the ones that aren't as great at follow-up, are going to get some of these leads. They're not going to trickle over to me, and then they have more of a chance of getting lucky.
I will say, when they were connecting, when I do get connected, the people are super anxious to see the property. It is a lot. I will say it's
when
a lot.
They vetted it out.
It's a lot less work, 100%. Yeah.
So, new changes. Love your thoughts. This will definitely not be the last time.
Well, we haven't even hit 2019. I feel like they have all this unveiling of 2019. We're not even there yet.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the meat of it. I'm on multiple conversations, I feel like, via text or DMs about Zillow and people tracking the changes, how many more you're getting. I've got people from different states that have been hitting me up on DM since our last video asking.
I still don't have a DM at all yet from Instagram.
DM Nicole if you can find her. She's out there.
If you find me.
Well, obviously they haven't found you yet. We always link up Nicole's Instagram on
it's
YouTube.
It's okay.
Go find her on the YouTube
I'll just
description.
Sit here and smile next to Byron.
All right, racket number 1.
Yeah, okay. Oh, this is the first one?
This is racket number 1.
Okay, I thought we were doing the other one first. No, I know what the main topic was.
So should
a different order.
Here's racket number 1.
Yeah.
Should dual agency exist? Here in Connecticut, we're in Connecticut. Dual agency is legal. I know there's probably agents like, it doesn't exist. In your state, it may not be legal. It may not be allowed. But overall, and Jay Thompson, who's obviously a longtime employee at Zillow, he's still writing. He wrote this article for Inman, and it's fairly good read. We'll link it up, of course. But just your thoughts overall. Should dual agency be allowed?
I'm good with dual agency.
Good with it, meaning you want it.
Yeah.
You want it.
Sure.
You like to double dip?
No, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, it's not necessarily what I'm pushing for. If other agents are bringing clients through, I just want to sell the house. And if that means that I'm selling it to somebody that's reaching out to me, through a lead or through a website or through an open house, yeah, I mean, who better to sell it than the listing agent? I get it. I mean, but
here's what you're saying, though. Here's what you just said, though, Nicole.
Well,
hear me out for a second.
You just said,
yeah, I'm good with it, whatever it takes to sell the house.
But I represent the buyer. I'm hearing you.
So you're coming at it right there from a perspective of whatever it takes to sell the house because I'm the listing agent, which is what you should do as the listing agent.
Yes.
So that becomes tricky when it's and he had a great line. Basically, I'm going to paraphrase off of this article. I read it before. The line was, it's impossible to say, I'm going to get you the most money for your house to a seller and say, I'm going to get you to pay the least amount of money possible to the buyer. Those are so contradictory. They're impossible statements. And in dual agency, you legitimately cannot, here in Connecticut anyways, you legitimately, during a dual agency situation, cannot negotiate for either party. You are transmitting information back and forth. Dual agency, oftentimes to do it right, is actually harder. Than
100%.
Yeah, it's definitely harder. That being said, if you're going to do it right, you really commoditize the agent's worth in a dual agency situation. So in a dual agency situation, say the commission is, we're just going to use examples, 6
apples.
6
don't they always say that?
They always say the apples thing, but
Talk
we're all smart enough to figure out what that means, 6%. So if the commission in an example was 6 and it's dual agency, usually there's a portion of that commission going to the buyer's agent.
Right.
Now you're going to keep the whole thing. But why do I say the agent is commoditized? Because if you're going to do it right and you're just going to transmit information, you're getting paid more money to do no negotiating, to transmit information, to be a relayer of information. And the reason it's more work is because you're basically trying to not get sued throughout the process.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah. I see that.
There are very few cases.
It's such a hard one, though, especially when you start going into commissions, because again, sometimes the listing agent's why should you? It's I would actually be getting that 3% or 2.5% on the other side if I had them buy a different home,
Correct. If you're bringing your buyer in, I get it.
Or if you've been doing like all this legwork with that. Say they've been your buyer
That's
for
really
years.
That's really the
and
problem.
Then,
that's the big problem. Like, say you're a mega brokerage or a mega team, and you're working with a ton of buyers, and you have a ton of listings. Well, now if one of your buyers wants to purchase one of your listings, that's where it's like, what am I gonna? It's my client. They're already my client. They can't buy your house now because I have the house listed. So I always tend to lean in Connecticut. You can go with a designated agency, which is a form of dual, where somebody is speaking with the buyer that's in your brokerage, and then somebody else is speaking with the listing agent. But I agree. There are very few instances. I agree with the premise, I think, that Jay was ultimately making, that he doesn't like dual agency. And I agree that most times it doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to be a very sophisticated buyer and seller to understand and really, really get that this person's not negotiating for you.
Well, and it's interesting though, because I feel like there's many times where buyers feel like they should go directly to the listing agent.
Oh yeah.
And I think that they do, and there's so many times that I then look sometimes at what those properties are closing at. And I can't guarantee that I would have been able to get them a better deal, but I feel like sometimes they actually probably could have gotten a better deal if they had somebody different representing them.
Jay's talking about single agent, dual agency is obviously a conflict of interest. And it is. Let's just be frank about that.
Yeah.
Single agent, dual agency is, I mean, if you're going to do it right,
especially if
it's very hard to prove that you're doing it right too.
Well, that's it. And it's I do know that sometimes I think, okay, especially if a buyer is coming through like just like a Zillow and it's the only home that they've ever looked at and they're putting in an agent, I'm certain that your seller probably feels ditched, especially if you've been working with them for, months and months and months, and they're sort of desperate to sell, and then because you literally are sort of like having to sort of ditch them in the sense that you can't give them your opinion on
I've never loved actually say that we're writing up a contract right now for single agent dual agency on one of my listings. That situation, everybody knows everybody kind of grew up together. It's a very unique situation, but generally speaking, I'm not a fan of single agent, dual agency. I'm a much bigger fan of how we typically do it, where it'll be designated in one agent on the team or in the brokerage, and then the other ones with the other side of the transaction. Because I've never, the few times in real estate where I've been like, I don't have a good feeling because both parties are unhappy. Have always been a dual agency situation. Where and they're not unhappy with you, they're unhappy with the deal, which starts to get people,
of course.
Oh, well, what are you saying on the other side? They start to question, and when they start to question, people are losing trust in the process. It puts an uneasy feeling in my stomach.
Well, you're talking about, and this is obviously, we're just talking strictly single, because obviously,
talking single agent.
I feel like we're in dual agency situations all the time because of the Ravis umbrella, and technically, even in that situation, I mean, you represent both the seller and the buyer.
Here's ultimately what I think. Do I think dual agency is a racket? I think single agency, dual agency is a racket. Single agent, dual agency. I think that the whole thing needs to be restructured. And because what you were about to say is technically, even if it's two William Ravis agents that live on the other side of the state that never talk and blah, 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 and they really could just kind of represent each party.
I think
they can in a designated situation where they're both but they
rarely
can't.
Do people
but
ever
in
sign a designated.
They can't really go and really dig in on a negotiation. You're still transmitting information. I think that they need to rewrite dual agency, and maybe they should just say single agencies out, and we're going to go to this two agent situation and put in some guidelines that speak to designated, make it a little bit more understandable.
Well, that's for sure, because I know that there's multiple times
and
where
give you a little more that you can do as a designated dual.
Because it also depends on who. Because especially if you're working with an agent that's across the state from you that you are not familiar with, like their temperament. I was in a situation in an office once, and an agent within the office was like, "Oh, I'm going to be showing your property. It seems like a little overpriced, so and so."
You can't even say that.
Well, and immediately she she brought in the manager and was like almost reprimanding this other agent because she's like, technically you represent my client and we have to stand firm on the price that I've like. So, I mean, we're then, as agents underneath the same umbrella, are then almost sort of required to, good job, Byron.
Yeah,
like, even if you don't believe that that's the right number, that's what you've put as a list price. And because we're representing that seller too. So again, again, especially if you don't know temperaments of some agents, I mean, that could have gone in a completely different direction had they not sort of been kind of friends and they couldn't sort of hammer it out like in that office. I mean,
listen, there's been a couple situations
it's like rentals.
where
that's why I hate doing rentals.
You guys everybody here in the office would want to have my head on a platter if I came out this door and said this right now. There have been times where I've thought, maybe we should just be a 100% listing shop. Like, I've actually thought that when I've gotten disgusted on dual agency situations, and when I've just gotten disgusted with the buyer
I don't get it.
temperament.
Oh, so you just like you're fired? Like you just because you don't like buyers?
Like saying, or
because of dual agency.
What brokerage? I'm sure there's brokerages out there. I'm just not very familiar with any big ones doing it. Saying, look, we're just work with listings. Because you've been
running into some issues with the situation. That's why.
No, over the years I've seen issues with dual agency.
Yeah.
And
within the same brokerage,
and I think I think when you say, well, I'm really good at listing properties and working with sellers, do I go all in on that and not work with buyers? Now listen. I'm the worst buyer agent here in our group. We have you're a great buyer agent. So it's not something I would do. It's just something I think that maybe I'd be interested to hear if there's mega teams thinking about just going all in on listings.
So then it's an interesting
Probably
thing,
not
then.
Because the expenses are higher and it's cheaper to work there's more it can be more labor inducive physically on a buyer.
It would save you on lead generation because what are you generating a lead for?
You get leads from your listings and the buyers. It's not a good business model now that I'm thinking it through.
But just like
it's
wait a minute. Why are we putting our riders on for sale signs then?
But it's just very interesting because your paths will cross on these dual agent situations, and how do you handle them? What's your status quo? What's your procedure for that?
And I don't mean to sort of go off the hook here, but I think that this would actually be this is like days worth of training, like
dual agency.
Yeah.
Well, we are training day after day after day here, but
yeah, no, I'm not saying that.
Let's move on to the next racket.
So
I think let's revisit dual agency because there's a lot to talk about there.
And I'd love
your thoughts on dual agency if it's something that you practice in your marketplace. Racket number 2. Airbnb will start designing houses in 2019. What do you think?
I think it's spectacular. I was just saying before we went on air that, I would love to the amount of information they have,
they're cashing in on a network of more than 5 million homes, castles, and tree houses that they've had for rent. Their business is worth an estimated $38 billion as it stands today.
I wanted to see their data. Like,
this is going to be in a futures division of Airbnb called Samara. And
they were calling it Backyard or something, weren't they?
Samara is the holding futures division, it seems like, and then Backyard is this, this new venture, and
I love it.
The futures division is meant to develop new products and services for the company.
Love it.
But Backyard specifically will be really rethinking your design and floor plans and space, right? And into the future and where you're going to be. And so they're really selling, I guess, IP more so, right?
I think it's awesome. I mean, and even in the article, if you do read it, it's actually a really interesting article because it's talking about how Airbnb has really sort of changed the landscape of real estate, in terms of values. Hotels, and what is becoming more valuable, and the house can be more valuable because you can obviously generate some of this additional money. I think it's smart for them to think next, like what's next, like what do we do next with all of this?
I think it's just smart to rethink housing, as they stated here.
Well, and who knows better than them? Yeah. I mean, they have their finger on the pulse. They're seeing what's rented. They're seeing what people are able to rent it for. They're seeing what spaces are obviously renting out the fastest.
But rethinking housing is smart. Like, we're living differently. Nicole lives in a really cool town here in Connecticut. I live right next door.
Trader.
And around our town green there are a ton of homes that are in the 1700s, right? And when you think about how much differently we live today than somebody from the 1700s, and these homes are in historic districts, and I was just in Charleston, South Carolina, and they have all these historic districts. They don't let you do anything. They don't even let them do AZEC trim in certain parts of Charleston. They make them do pine. No, it's pine because that's how it's always been.
That makes sense.
And so then it rots out in 4 years.
Well,
so it doesn't make sense. And what also doesn't make sense are those 1700s homes. They're first of all, they're too expensive to renovate to today's standards, and not a lot of people want to renovate them. I got into an argument at one of Nicole's, not an argument, a debate, rather. One of Nicole's parties last year, about how historic districts can hold certain communities back from people actually wanting to go there because they don't offer, specifically the town we're talking about. There's not besides our new development. There is not.
But that took years.
It's
of going
super
through
luxe.
the historical.
If you want space that's 2020, you can't get it on the Guilford Green in that town. It doesn't exist. Okay, it's all old homes. It costs a mint to redevelop those. So we live differently. Technology, having a home that speaks to your technology is going to be very, very important over the next 20, 30 years. And the UN rather predicts, and this is out of the article that we'll link up, the world will construct of 2.5 trillion more square feet of buildings worldwide by 2060, which, as they point out, is the equivalent to another Paris every week. So think about that. If there's 2.5 trillion more square feet of buildings worldwide, where do you think the people are going to flock to over the next 40 years between now and 2060? They're going to flock to markets and towns and cities that will allow this new type of space. And Airbnb's just basically setting themselves up to cash in on what's inevitable.
Right, I agree. I think though, as like a sidestep from what you're saying though, because I agree with what it is that you're saying, but I think that there are also, like, my home is downtown, but I'm dual zone. So like I'm commercially zoned as well. So I think in those situations,
could you tear your house down?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I may not be able to tear it down. No, but my point is how can I optimize my profit?
Well, you can if you can't tear it down. You can't optimize.
But, I can though because it's also considered to be a multifamily. What can I do?
You can optimize it in their current restraints. My saying is you don't have free reign over your land.
But this article is also talking about existing properties that are building accessory buildings or structures on the property too. So how can individuals optimize their investment? So if they're okay with an accessory apartment in the back, here's the layout that you should do that we're finding is to be the most successful for your Airbnb venture.
Listen, and in the town that we're talking about of Guilford, Connecticut, there are a lot of these properties that have legal outbuildings, which would be perfect for what Airbnb is kind of doing. But my overall point is when you're renovating 1700s structures,
well, especially when
it's dramatically more expensive than just building new.
Yeah. Well, the problem too is that, we're also in flood zones. So that plays that's like a whole nother layer. It's a whole nother problem. Flood zones slow down development too, in my mind.
But 100% not a racket for Airbnb to do this. It's smart.
Genius, I actually kind of want to sit down with like the back end and just to like.
Want to sit down with Airbnb? Hey, Airbnb, get them on the phone. Nicole wants to talk to you.
I just want to pick your brain a little.
Racket number 3, death of the home appraisal. So we know that every industry is getting chopped up in some manner. Just because of certain things, technology obviously being the biggest. And this is a proposed government regulations announced last week by the Office of Controller of Currency, the OCC, who would raise the threshold for residential real estate transactions requiring an appraisal to $400,000. So right now the threshold, which I will say I learned something new.
Yeah.
I did not realize that there was a threshold from the OCC that required residential appraisals for the real estate transactions up to $250,000, which was last increased in 1994. So basically, why should this be an issue for appraisers? It's because
they'll lose a lot of business.
Banks could say up to $400,000, which is a big chunk of sales.
Huge chunk
in America.
Well, they're saying that they feel like they need to up it because they're saying that the median sale price right now is $250. So that's why they wanted to jack it up to the $400. I mean, we were talking about it before. Yeah. I don't think I've ever had a property that I had listed that was going through a bank.
And typically 100% of them, obviously, that I've seen. You know, I will say that I think I've seen one situation in my career where there was not a bank appraisal and there was a bank, but it was like over $1 million and they were putting down like $200,000 or $300,000. Yeah. Well, I mean, they were only borrowing $200,000 or $300,000. You know, it was like one of those situations.
So they were okay with it. They didn't need to. And the bank was just like, it doesn't matter. These people are loaded. Who cares? Yeah, I've never. But it's also saying though that you can. It sounds like you can get an appraisal. Just doesn't have to be from a licensed appraiser. So I'm curious to see what'll then happen with like BPOs, because you could do BPOs. Although
no, it won't be BPOs. Here's where the banks are going.
But it's also, again, it's talking about trying to quantify, like we were saying, like market value. If a buyer is buying it, then in my mind, that's market value. So if they're willing to just go off of that, then like you have market value almost all day when people are putting in contracts.
They're going to have some checks and balances, right? They're going to look at some of these automated algorithms, not necessarily the Zestimate, although it may end up on their report.
Stop it.
That's
irresponsible.
I'm just giving you some examples. I think that the banks are really looking, all the banks right now are looking on how to get closings down to a 2 or 3 week period. They're all looking on that in the back end.
Because some are doing it.
And so part of that is, how do we get more automated algorithms, maybe?
Try
algorithmic.
No.
Algorithms to give estimated home values.
What they should do is what is that? A few weeks we were talking about. Is it Zillow is like sending over comps and then the seller gets to pick. So maybe the seller gets to start doing the appraisal.
but here's, one thing that's obvious. How do you? Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How do you feel about appraisers? Not appraisers, but how do you feel about the appraisals right now?
It's something that I don't think about often. So I guess
always come in.
Yeah. Well, that's not true. I do have a few that like I have to, I don't know. It goes back and forth, because sometimes they're like, hey, can you like send me all the information? And then I'm like, but you're getting paid for this, not me. But you obviously want to do right by your seller. So you want to supply information that they need. I guess I don't think about it enough. So I guess I'm okay with it.
Here's what I don't like about the bank appraisals. In the system we do now with a licensed appraiser, and appraisers are probably going to chew me up for this.
Yeah, we have some friends.
You're sending out one human being, and it's their opinion.
Well, especially...
And the whole thing's riding off of this one
especially if they're
opinion.
not from the area. Like, do you know where you are?
Especially if they go...
Like, you don't even know where to get
Especially
lunch
if they just go and they just don't like you.
Ooh.
Like, that's actually part of it, and that's a small part of it. Or they're having
like a bad day, or like maybe their kid was up all night and they're just trying to like...
But right now, there's enough data, information, algorithms where, and I don't think this is probably the case in a marketplace like us where you have it's New England, you have a 1700s home, and then you have a new one, and you have all this mixed bag of crap. But in a marketplace where you have 1,000 homes in a gated community, it's very easy to figure out the comps. And so I don't think appraisers like this, but I don't think this is a racket, because the banks are going to do whatever they can to get the closing period, the under contract period to closing shorter.
Yeah.
This gets them closer. This allows them to, if you're talking about saving maybe $300 per transaction on $500,000 transactions, 500,000 transactions, that's a big number for the banks.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm pro bank, but this is definitely where we're heading.
Yeah.
And I think it's inevitable. The appraisers have been really really squeezed anyways.
Oh, they're super squeezed.
Yeah, they really got.
They are super squeezed. The amount of people that are getting out of it just because there's just no longer any money to be made unless you're just like
you've got to go super high end, add value, or strategy.
You have to, or you have to be doing them not in a trend, like if there's like a divorce or if someone's just trying to figure out
I think if that's your gimmick, your thing, that's what you like to do is evaluate homes, you're probably ultimately going to get sucked in as an employee to some of these big real estate firms down the road.
And that's where you lose it. It's I think that going up to 400 makes the most sense because like you were saying before, it's super easy to, I feel like, justify numbers up to there, especially because there's so many happening.
There's just a lot of transactions.
It's really when, you're trying, even as an agent, like you're looking at a home that is worth probably $2 or $3 million, but there's legitimately just no comps.
Yeah.
So
and technology is going to dial this in a little bit more. So we had a lot there. Certainly, please leave us a comment on any one of these 4 topics. Anything that you're thinking, we're done.
That was it.
We got to go to the meeting. That was it.
Wow.
Anything you're thinking of, any topics you want us to cover, drop it in the comments. And subscribe up if you haven't, for crying out loud.
I should subscribe.
Throw us the damn subscribe. Nicole,
I'll
subscribe to the show.
Subscribe today.
All right, keep it real out there.
Bye, guys.